Hello friends, welcome to Code Crush Coding. In this video we are going to learn about the constructor. So this is the first time we are making use of this word constructor in Python coding. So what are the constructors? So a constructor is a special type of method or function which is used to initialize the instance members of the class. So instance members are nothing but the variables that are declared inside the class. So constructor is a function. So constructor definition is executed when we create the object of the class. So we have seen once we declare the class, we instantiate that class with the help of creating the object. So constructor definition is executed when we create the object of this class. So in Python, the init simulates the constructor of the class. This method is called when the class is instantiated. So this init simulates the constructor of the class. So in Java, the constructor is basically the name of the class itself, but in Python, we have this init function or the method which specifies our constructor. So the constructor accepts the self keyword as a first argument, which allows accessing the attributes or method of the class. In the previous video, we have declared one method called show. In that also we have seen we got this self keyword, which is the first parameter of a method. So in similar way, the constructor is also a method. So it will also have this self keyword as the first argument, and with the help of this self keyword we can access the attribute or method of the class. We can pass any number of arguments at the time of creating the class object depending upon the init definition. So if in init we have two parameters or two arguments, so we can pass two arguments. So it depends upon the definition of init, we can pass the number of arguments. So it is mostly used to initialize the class attributes. So the main function of constructor is used to initialize the class attributes or class variables. Constructors can be of two types: parameterized constructors and non-parameterized constructors. So if you don't provide the constructor in our class, so it will by default as non-parameterized constructor. So let's perform coding for all these points that we have seen to understand the constructors in a better way. So this is my oops.python file. So let's start with creating the class first. So how we create a class? With the help of class keyword, and the name of the class, let's say we want to create employee class, and here you can have the methods. So let's first declare one method, def, let's say show is my method name, show. As we have seen, by default it takes self as the first parameter, and inside this I want to say print in self method, and I want to close this class. So this is the content of my class, and here I will create employee1 object of the class employee, and also create the second object employee2 of the class employee. And now I will call this show method. So employee1 dot show, employee2 dot show. So what will be the output of this code? It will print in self method two times. Let's run this code. So see, we are getting here in self method, right? So now we haven't provided any constructor here, right? Because what we have seen, with the help of init keyword or function, we can declare the constructor. So here we haven't provided any constructor in our code. So in this code, the constructor by default is non-parameterized constructor, that Python code internally takes it if you don't provide anything. But if we want to declare the constructor, then how we can declare? So when the class starts, here you need to provide, as it is a function or method, you need to make use of def keyword, then underscore, and you will by default get the suggestion which is init keyword or method. So we will say init, and as it is a function, it will take the first parameter as self, and inside this function, let's say I want to print in constructor. and as this constructor is non-parameterized constructor because we haven't provided any arguments to it, so let's declare that also in non-parameterized constructor. So this is the first function which is our constructor, and this is the second method which is show. So to call the show method, we have done the syntax in this way. We have created the object and then dot show. But for calling this constructor, we don't need to provide anything like that. Why? Because constructor, as you have seen here in Python, this method is called when the class is instantiated. So as you know, this is the instantiation where you have created the object emp1. So at that time only this constructor will be called. Let's run this code. See, now what is happening? First time this line will be executed, right? After this class gets completed, this line will get executed, employee1 equals to employee. So here we have created the object. So at that time only first time the constructor is called, which says in non-parameterized constructor. Now second time again the second object is called, again the constructor is called in non-parameterized constructor, and after that these two statements are there, employee1.show and employee2.show. so here we are getting those statement in self method two times. What if I do some changes here? Now let's say I want to print in this way. So what will be the output now? So first time it will print in constructor, then it will print in self method, then again it will print in constructor, and then in show method, right? Let me print here in show method. Let's run this code. So see, here we are getting non-parameterized constructor in show method, then again in non-parameterized constructor and in show method. So in this way you can declare the constructor. So this was the non-parameterized constructor. Now if you want to declare the parameterized constructor, here you can provide some values to it. Let's say you want to provide ID. So what you can do here, and to access these attributes we can make use of self keyword. Here we have seen in which allows accessing the attribute or method of the class, self keyword is used. So how we can declare this? So you can say here self.id equal to id. So whatever id I will get here, I will assign this id to the current instance of this class. So self.id equal to id, and here I will print, or directly here also you can print that in show method, and you can say here comma self.id. Let's try to, as this constructor is now taking the argument id, if you don't pass here argument, so it will throw an error. Let's run the code first. So see, we are getting here error. It says missing one required positional argument id, because it is expecting us to provide us the value of id. So here you need to say, now for first employee I am providing the id as 101, and for the second employee I am providing id as 102. Let's run, save this code, run now. So see, it is able to execute correctly, and you can see first time when the object is created it is calling non-parameterized constructor. Oh, we haven't changed the print statement here. Now it is parameterized constructor. So here you can see it is parameterized constructor, and for this first one when it is show method is called, it's printing the id of first employee which is 101, and for the second employee it is printing the id 102. So this is the use of parameterized constructor and non-parameterized constructors. So what is the default constructor? So when we don't include the constructor in the class or forget to declare it, then that becomes the default constructor. So if you don't provide any constructor in your class, so by default it is the non-parameterized constructor, because we don't provide any arguments to the constructor. Python internally handles that. So what if we have more than one constructor in a single class? So the object of the class will always call the last constructor if the class has multiple constructors. So if there are multiple constructors declared in our class, so Python will always execute the last constructor which you declared inside the class. So let's check in our code. So I have here class employee, and here I have declared the two constructors where I have two non-parameterized constructors. So this is the first constructor, this is the second constructor, and when I create the object, which constructor will get called. So let's run this code. As you have seen here, it is calling the second constructor. So whatever will be the last constructor, that will be called. If I create another object here, let's say we want to create employee2 as well. So employee2 equals to employee. In this case, which constructor will be called? It will be the second constructor only. See, for both the object it is calling the second constructor. Why? Because it is the last constructor which will be executed when you have the multiple constructor. So these were the non-parameterized constructor, because these were not taking any of the arguments. What if I declare here another constructor? Now this will be the last constructor, right? So Python will consider this constructor while executing the code. So this is my constructor here, self, and let's say we want to take the parameters here, and let's print here the third constructor, the third constructor. Now we have three constructor here. The first one is the non-parameterized constructor, second one is also non-parameterized, third one is a parameterized constructor which is expecting one argument, and here we have created two objects. Now we are not passing anything here, but the Python will consider this as the latest constructor, so it is expecting one argument. So let's try to run this code. It should give us an error. Let's see what error it throws. See, we are getting here error which says type error, missing one required positional argument ID. So what Python has done, or what the compiler has done, it is taken this constructor while executing or creating the object, because this is the latest constructor, and what we have seen in theory, the object of the class will always call the last constructor. So here we are expecting the ID. So if I provide here ID, let's say 10, and second one is 20, and if I run this code now, so it is executing successfully and it is calling the third constructor because we are provided the argument, so it is behaving correctly. So that was the use of constructors, parameterized, non-parameterized, and we have also seen when we create more than one constructor in a class, which constructor will be called. So that's it for this video. We will cover another topics in next video. Thank you for watching.